Boy, what a moment this is, fans. I know that you can feel the tenseness that we feel here in New York. As the National League up for the last time with 7 minutes left to play, the deadline before the blackout in New York, Mayor LaGuardia was very kind to set aside the time to give baseball more time tonight. You know, this game was supposed to end at 9:10, but there was an unavoidable delay in starting, and so Mayor LaGuardia very graciously gave baseball a little longer time, right up until the actual deadline of the blackout, which is 9:30. He's getting all set again. Here's the pitch. There's a swing, and there's a foul that the first baseman may have a chance on. He's going back, and it's going into the stands. A foul ball, and it's 2-2 on Little Mel. Now Bertie Tebbetts gets a new baseball from Bill McGowan. Tosses that ball out there. Well, the American League, as you know, scored their 3 runs in the first inning on a home run, a double, and another home run. And the National League scored their run in the 8th inning on a pinch home run by Mickey Owen. Now he's getting all set again. It's 2-2 on Ott. Here it comes. It's a swing and a foul tip, and it got away from Tebbetts, and he's going to get another swing. Looks like Bertie was hurt with that foul. Tebbetts went down on one knee, but he's getting up now and seems to be okay. Well, it's been a wonderful sight here in New York tonight. These fans that have jammed into these stands have really enjoyed it. And Jim and Mel and I have really seen a grand ball game. We hope that you've enjoyed it on the radio. Here comes the next pitch, and Ott hits a pop-up right in front of the plate. The catcher, Tebbetts, is down the line just a few feet and takes that ball 20 feet down the line toward third, and 1 foot inside the line, a fair ball, and Ott is out. So, fans, 2 more now, and the ball game will be over. Now the next man to come up, a left-handed hitter, is Eno Slaughter of the St. Louis Cardinals. A great ball player. This fella can run, he can field, he can hit, and he loves to play ball. There's 5 minutes left here in New York. He's getting all set now. There's the windup, and here comes the next pitch, and there's a swing and a foul. 1 strike. American League 3 and the National League 1. That's the setup. Nobody on and 1 gone in the last half of the 9th. Here comes the pitch, and there is a foul. It's right up here to the right, just to the right of our booth. Catcher Tebbetts gets another new ball and fires it right out there to Benton. Country Slaughter batting for the National League with nobody on and 1 gone. Benton is all set. Here comes the next pitch, and Slaughter takes one in the dirt. A ball. Ball 1 and strike 2 for Eno. He's up in there batting left-handed, a red 9 in the back of his white uniform. American League infielders keep up a constant stream of chatter. Here comes the pitch, and there is another ball. He almost hit him in the leg. He was going to go for that one. It was a sinker, and he started to go for it, but he pulled his bat in time, and the umpire calls it a ball. The outfield of Williams, DiMaggio, and Henrik that's gone all the way is playing Slaughter straight away. Just about 4 minutes left. They'll get their bats all right. He's getting all set again. Here comes the next pitch, and there's a swing and a hopper foul to the right of the plate. Slaughter starts down the first base line, but the umpire, Bill McGowan, yells foul. He tells Bertie Tebbetts to throw that ball away, flips him a new ball, and the American Leaguers peg it around. The next man to come up after Slaughter will be Ernie Lombardi. Bill McGowan is getting a new supply of baseballs now in his blue serge suit. Al Benton is the second American League pitcher tonight. Chandler started. He's getting all set again. Here comes the next one to Slaughter. Slaughter swings. There's a long fly ball to dead center, but DiMaggio is out there backing up. He caught it, and there's 2 gone. Country Slaughter hit one a mile that time towards center field, but Joe DiMaggio raced back about 35 or 40 feet and pulled it down, and there's 2 gone. And now, fans, here comes Ernie Lombardi, the last hope of the National League. Here's Ernie Lombardi. Here's the first pitch. There's a strike. It's over the outside corner. 2 out and nobody on in the last half of the 9th inning. American League 3-1. Here comes the next pitch to Lom. Lom swings and misses a change of pace pitch in around his knees, and the pitcher made him look bad on it. It's 2 strikes on Lombardi. There's 2 out. 1 more out and the ball game is over, and the American League will play the service team in Cleveland tomorrow night. Now Al Benton is all set again. Here comes the next pitch. He hits a high fly ball to right field. Looks like it's all over. Tommy Henrik is in under the ball, and he caught it. The game is over, and the American League defeats the National League in New York in the 10th annual All-Star game. And so, fans, the American League will play the National League, will play the All-Star team in Cleveland tomorrow night. And here are the totals. The American League 3 runs, 7 hits, and no errors. The National League 1 run, 6 hits, and 1 error. The winning pitcher in the ball game is Chandler, and the losing pitcher is Morton Cooper. I want to give my colleagues who worked on the broadcast with me tonight just a chance to say goodbye. We're going to have to get off in a hurry, and here's Mel Allen.
It was swell working this game with Bob Elson and Jimmy Britt. It was a beautiful ball game to watch. A lot of swell pitching. Only one half inning, which was any great deal of offensive fireworks in the first inning when Lou Budrow homered and Rudy York homered with Tom McHenrick on base, who had doubled prior to York's homer. It was really a swell ball game to watch. Wish you were all here. All right, here's Jimmy Britt.
The fact that this game had a blackout deadline to make added to the suspense and drama of the final innings. It was an all-star game worth remembering, and the American League is going to give Uncle Sam Service 9 in Cleveland tomorrow night a real battle.
Well, thank you very much, Jim and Mel. It's been a real pleasure to work with you tonight. I'm looking forward tomorrow night with working with Wade Hoyt and Jack Rennie over at Cleveland, when Mutual will bring you an exclusive coverage again of the great all-star game at Cleveland in the big municipal stadium. The players are getting off the field. The American League players are shaking hands with each other, and so are the National League players as they go off the field. And the final score again is the American League 3, the National League 1. The winning pitcher is Chandler, and the losing pitcher is Cooper. And now this is Bob Elson saying good night from the Polo Grounds in New York City. We return you to our New York studios.
CBS World News brings you the early morning reports of its correspondents at home and abroad. Here are the highlights of the biggest news received up to 8 a.m. Eastern Wartime, Monday, July 20th. The Russians have gained at Voronezh, but have fallen back south of Miloravko. In Egypt, 4,000 Axis prisoners have been taken since last Tuesday. And in Western Europe, the RAF attacked Nazi submarine plants near Bremen during the night. Now here is Harry Marble and the news.
Before calling in CBS World correspondents, here are the latest details on the fighting in Russia. The noon communique of the Soviet High Command announces that the Red Army has made new gains in the Voronezh sector of the Southern Front, but the Germans are continuing their advance south of Miloravko toward the industrial city of Stalingrad on the Volga. The war bulletin says that Soviet forces attacked in strong force during the night south and west of Voronezh, and a special dispatch to the newspaper Pravda adds that the German 75th Infantry Division was routed in this fighting. To the south, the Russians have made a new retreat in the Miloravko sector. But in another sector of this same front, the Russians counterattacked and killed 1,500 Germans. And still farther south, the Nazis are driving closer to Rostov, the so-called gateway to the Caucasus. Loss of Voroshilovgrad to this advancing Nazi spearhead has been acknowledged by Moscow. And now across the Atlantic to the British capital. We take you to London.
CBS London, Charles Hollingwood reporting. The British used their big 4-engine bombers against Germany again last night. The big planes carried on the RAF's war against the German submarine buildings. They bombed the U-boat building yards at Vegesack, which is about 10 miles from Bremen, and attacked other targets in northwest Germany. 3 of the big bombers were lost. On the western...
Justify the enemy. Appease him. Excuse him. Pardon, condone, or accept him. And by any intelligent process of thought, you will arrive at the diabolical, tortured, debased world of Germany and her Axis partners.
Columbia's Wartime Bureau of Information presents Ralph Bellamy in They Burn the Books, written by Stephen Vincent Benet.
Iron years of terror and evil. 9 years since a fire was lighted in a public square in Berlin. 9 years since the burning of the books. Do you remember? Write it down in your calendars. May 10th, 1933. And write it down in red for the light of fire.
These are people who work by fire. The Reichstag went up in flames that February, and in March they got their majority and moved in. The stormtroopers, the heroes of the beer hall putsch, the boys with a taste for beatings and executions, the limping doctor, the swollen ex-army pilot, gangster and bravo, hoodlum and triggerman, led by the screaming voice that is war and hate, moved in on Germany like a cloud of locusts, having planned and plotted for long. They strangled the German Republic and moved in. And people said,
Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
And tell her so, Miss Bud.
My dear fellows, this fellow Hitler, quite extraordinary. Wonder what the beggar's up to.
or people said,
Yeah, I see by the papers they had an election in Germany. They seem to have lots of elections over there.
Say, what do you know about this bank holiday, Joe? If you need some cash, I got a couple of bucks, but, the banks are bound to reopen.
that was March 5th. They burned the books May 10th. Why bother about books? Why bother to go back to that fateful year that prepared the blood purge and the wars, the death of Austria, the trick of Munich, the bombers over the defenseless towns, and all we know and all that must be fought here, now, and always till the score is paid. And from its grim recital, pick one instance of calculated wrong. A book's a book. It's paper, ink, and print. If you stab it, it won't bleed. If you beat it, it won't bruise. If you burn it, it won't scream. Burn a few books. Burn hundreds. Burn 1,000,000. What difference does that make?
It does to me. Excuse me, sir. My name is Friedrich Schiller, a name once not unknown in Germany. One of the glories, so they said, of Germany. A Germany these robbers never knew. Over a century and a half ago, I spoke and wrote of freedom. I spoke against oppressors and dictators. I spoke for every man who lifts his head and will not bow to tyrants. And though I died, my poems and plays spoke on in every tongue and every land for freedom. For that's what books can do. And now, today, in the land where I was born...
The play William Tell shall no longer be performed on the stage. It glorifies the dangerous and unseemly spirit of revolt against conquerors. It shall no longer be performed on the German stage. This is an order.
That's what they do. That's what they do to the mind. That's what they do to the books of their own great dead. That's how they foul the present and the past. Shut the mouth so that it cannot speak because it spoke for freedom. Now here's another ghost. Pale, frail, satirical, a mocking spirit, but with the light of freedom in his eyes. Your name, brave ghost.
My name is Heinrich Heine, born to much sorrow, born to be a man. Out of my laughter, my heart's despair, I made my little songs, such simple songs a child could understand them, and grown men remember them and love them all their lives. Some were so funny, some were pitiful, and some were trumpet calls for liberty, for though I couldn't fight, I was a fighter. And when my time had come to die, I said, after long tormenting my matchless grave, bury me with a sword upon my coffin, for I have been a soldier of humanity.
A soldier of humanity. And you deserve that name. But now, today, what happens to your song?
Well, there was one about a Lorelei. Just a small song. It went, let's see, like this. Ich weiß nicht, was soll es bedeuten, dass ich so traurig bin. You've heard it, maybe? Many people sing it. They sang it many years along the Rhine. They sing it still.
Still?
Oh, yes. That one of mine, they haven't burned. That would be just a little difficult. Too many Germans know the words by heart. So with the totalitarian courtesy, they've kept the song and blotted out my name. You see, I was a Jew.
New editions of the works of the Jew Heinrich Heine are not desirable. In all textbooks and anthologies, where the words of the song The Lorelei appear, the name of the Jew Heine shall be omitted, and the author given as author unknown.
Author well known since 1842. Author unknown since 1933.
That's what they do to soldiers of humanity. That's how they rob the soldier of his sword. The dead man of the one thing he may keep, his name. His very name. Don't think that's all. Don't think it's just the singers and the poets. Light the flames. Light the flames and hear them roar. See what the flames consume. They're coming now, the men with the tramping feet, the hard-faced boys with the truncheons, the new order. The flames they've lighted howl and leap in the square. You can't set fire to a Reichstag every day, but the fire that they light today shall fling its shadows in flame and shadow all over the world. Hear them tramp. They're coming. They bring the books to the fire.
The books of the Jew, Albert Einstein, to the flames.
Einstein, the scientist who thought in universes. Einstein, the man we honor in our land.
To the flames with him! To the flames! The books of Sigmund Freud! To the flames!
Freud, prober of the riddles of man's mind. World known. World famous.
To the flames! The flames! Burn them! We don't want thought! We don't want mind! We want one will, one leader, and one vote!
One vast inexorable stupidity.
Who said that? Gag him, burn him to the flames! To the flames with Heinrich Mann and Thomas Mann! Gorky the Russian! Schnitzler the Austrian! Hemingway, Dreiser the American! And now, to the flames with this!
That is the Bible. Would you burn God's word?
We need no Bible but the words of the leader. We have no God except the German God. We have the tanks, the guns, the bombs, the planes, and that shall be enough.
And yet there shall be weeping for this burning, weeping throughout your land, the weeping of poor women and old men who loved and trusted in the word of God, and now are bursting homeless in your world, for you have taken their last failing hope, the promise of their Father and their Lord.
How dare you speak, exiled and Jew? How dare you speak to us?
I speak for all humanity in chains, exiles, Jew, Christian, for all the prison camps, for those who dwell in them and bide their time, for the dishonored, for the dispossessed, for those you have ground like wheat. I speak for every honest man of God driven from his own pulpit by your might, and for those who saw that happen and remember it. I speak for the dark earth and the mute voices, and yet I speak humanity unbound.
You? You are just a singer, a worthless singer.
True. And that is why I speak, because I know, being a singer, what moves every heart. I speak with little bobs, little songs so simple any child can understand just what they say, and yet so memorable. Once you have heard them, you will not forget them, for they will stay within your memory. Sweet as first love, salt as the tears of man, free as the winds of heaven and the sky. And you do well to try to shut my mouth, for while one little song of mine remains, all that you hate and would destroy remains. Human and grace and human tenderness, laughter and mockery, and the bare sword, the sword I wanted on my lowly coffin, the sword of liberty.
We'll shut your mouth. We'll find you in the graveyard where you lie. Dig up your rotten bones and scatter them. Scatter them till there's nobody in all the world who's heard of Heinrich Heine.
Dig deep. Dig well. Scatter my bones. Break up my burial stones. Erase my name with all your thoroughness, your lumbering, fat-headed thoroughness smelling of beer and bombs. And yet, while there's a book, there will be a Heine. there will be Heinrich Heine, laughing at you still, laughing with all the free.
Yes, there will be Heine. There will be all those whose words lift up man's heart. But only if we choose. This battle is not just a battle of lands, a war of conquest, a balance of power war. It is a battle for the mind of man, not only for his body. It will decide what you and you and you can think and say, plan, dream, and hope for in your inmost minds for the next 1,000 years. Decide whether man goes forward toward the light, stumbling and striving, clumsy, but a man, or back to the dark ages, the dark gods, the old barbaric forest that is fear. Books are not men, and yet they are alive. They are man's memory and his aspiration, the link between his present and his past, the tools he builds with, all the hoarded thoughts winnowed and sifted from a million minds, living and dead, to guide him on his way. Suppose it happened here. Suppose the books were burned here. This is a school somewhere in America. This is the kind of school we've always had, argued about, paid taxes for, kept on with, because we want our kids to know something. Suppose it happened here.
The class will come to order. This morning we are going to discuss some of the basic American ideas on which our nation was founded. Freedom, tolerance, liberty under law. To start the discussion, I'm going to ask Joe Barnes to recite the Gettysburg Address to us. Do you think you can do that without looking at your book too much, Joe?
Why, well, I guess so, Miss Winslow. Studied it last night.
Very well, Joe. You may begin.
The Gettysburg Address by Abraham Lincoln. 87 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
Stop.
And now we are engaged.
Stop. The words of the Gettysburg Address can no longer be studied in any school of our glorious new order.
But those are the words of Lincoln.
But Miss Winslow told me...
Miss Winslow is no longer your teacher. I am your teacher. Attention! When I give the command, you will rise and bring your textbooks to my desk. All this nonsense of freedom and tolerance, that is finished. All this nonsense of men being equal, that is finished. We shall give you new textbooks. The old ones will be burned in the schoolyard. Are there any questions? Good. The new order does not like questions.
I protest. This is infamous. You can't know what you're doing. I've taught here for 20 years.
So I understand. You know, that is a long time, Miss Winslow. Too long. You deserve a long rest. We'll see that you get it. No. You needn't bother to say goodbye to your students. Guards, take the woman away.
Impossible? Fantastic? Sounds that way. Ask the teachers and books of occupied France. France that loved letters. France once the light of Europe. Read the list of the books the French can't read anymore. What sort of books? Well, there are all kinds, of course, from detective stories to the life of a great French queen. But here, for instance, is a history of Poland.
The best.
Why? Well, according to the new order, Poland has no history.
Poland has no history.
And here, French history for secondary schools. History of France. History of France and Europe. Contemporary Europe. Legend and fables of France for children.
The press withdrawn on the blacklist.
But these are not guns or daggers stored up against revolt. They're the commonplace textbooks thumbed by 1,000 schoolboy fingers, ink-spotted, dog-eared, drowsed over in classrooms. Familiar and dull and mild. They must be harmless enough.
They are not harmless. We know what we are doing.
Yes. They know what they are doing. They know if you take the children of a country and teach them nothing but lies about the world, give them no chance for argument or questions, give them no books that show another side, no word of all the words that speak for freedom, The man who grows from the child will believe the lies and never hear of the truth. It's a simple plan, as simple and efficient as arsenic. Just rewrite all the books to suit yourself, and the rest will follow in time. The beatings and burnings, the massed mechanical might, the metal men. Would you like a sample of American history, Nazi style? Can you stand it? You'd better know what it would be like for your children and their children. You heard Joe Barnes give the Gettysburg Address. This is what he'd be like if he'd never heard it, or anything like it, ever. If all his books were the textbooks of the New Order. If our school books wore swastikas. Come in, Joe, will you? Looks different in his brown shirt, doesn't he? Can you tell us about American history, Joe? Some names and dates and people?
American history dates from the foundation of the New Order.
Nothing before that?
Nothing important.
Well, come, Joe, there must have been one or two things before that.
Nothing important.
After all, for instance, the discovery of America. That was fairly important. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, that is in my book. America was discovered in 1492 by Christopher Columbus, an honorary Aryan.
An honorary Aryan? I always thought he was an Italian.
That was before the New Order. He is now an honorary Aryan of the second class, like Mussolini and Hirohito.
I wonder how he likes that. However, after Columbus...
There came the New Order.
What, weren't there just a few things in between? Wasn't there something called the Declaration of Independence?
Oh, that. Yes, there was that. But it was all wrong. It said everyone was entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That was all wrong.
Who wrote it?
It is unimportant who wrote it. It is not in my book.
Didn't you ever hear of a man named Thomas Jefferson?
Thomas Jefferson? No. There is no such man in my book.
Or George Washington?
Yes, he was a general, but not a very good one. He was defeated by German might at the Battle of Trenton. Afterwards, he foolishly became president of the United States instead of ruling his country with a strong, mailed fist.
But maybe he didn't believe in ruling people with a strong, mailed fist.
He may have had some such old-fashioned sentimental ideas. That is why he's unimportant historically.
And is he an honorary Aryan, too?
The state is not yet decided. But the man to study in his period is Benedict Arnold, a man much ahead of his time.
I always thought Benedict Arnold was a traitor to his country.
Traitor? What nonsense. He sensibly tried to collaborate with a stronger power in order to save his countrymen from the horrors of democracy and revolution. He is a very honorary Aryan of the first class, with stars. We have many honorary Aryans, just like Benedict Arnold.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised. And just one last question, Joe.
Yes, but hurry, please. I must attend a Strength Through Joy meeting, and it is necessary for me to clean my pistol first.
Did you ever hear of a man who said, government of the people, by the people, for the people?
Certainly not. Of course not. It's a lie. You've been spying on me. My father did have the book, but I never saw it. It's a long while ago, and the teacher's been sent away. I know nothing about Abraham.
That's it. That's how they work. That's what they do to kids. That's the way they like to work here.
That's it, my friend. You see, we can destroy houses with bombs and people with starvation, outflank defensive lines and tramp ahead. We can destroy the spirit of a nation with poison doubts and fears, erase its history, blot out its past, sully its famous names, and substitute our worlds for all the worlds of liberty. But while there is a single man alive, hidden or starving, who somehow remembers the vows of freedom, the undying words that spoke for man's free mind, though they were said 1,000 years ago, our conquest is not perfect. They are terrible, these immaterial and airy words, sharp as edged swords, infectious as the plague. They travel silently from mind to mind, leaving no trace. They live in quiet books you hardly would suspect, unless our leader has wisely warned us of them. They hide and creep in jokes and catchwords under our own noses, in dots and dashes in a bar of music. Fit in the silent eyes of hungry men, rating their time, rating their hungry time. That's why they must be killed. That's why we burn the books. That's why we burn all knowledge, all the recollected thought gathered in patience through 3,000 years of civilization. That knowledge is man's brain. Until we've taken an electric wire and burned the brain cells from his very brain so he will be a dumb and gaping slave, we cannot win. And still we mean to win. Get the fire ready. Bring the books to the fire.
9 years ago in Berlin. 9 years ago in a public square in Berlin. They burned the books, and that was the beginning. We didn't know it then. We know it now. Here the books burn. This is in memory. This is in remembrance. This is for all the lies that have been told. The innocent blood, the blood that cries from the ground, rise up and speak, you voices. Voices of dead and living, past and present. Voices of gagged men, whispering through sore lips. Voices of children robbed of their small songs. Strong voices, chanting of the rights of man, rebel and fighter, men of the free heart. We, too, shall build a fire, though not in fear, revenge, or barren hate, but such a great and cleansing fire it shall leap through the world like leaping flame. Freedom to speak and pray. Freedom from want and fear. Freedom for all. Freedom of thought. Freedom of man's bold mind. Who marches with us?
I am Friedrich Schiller, and I march with you in the cause of man.
I am the soldier of humanity, the mocking smile upon the face of time that men call Heine, and I march with you.
I am old and blind. I knew oppression and defeat and scorn, and the high justice of eternal God. Paradise lost and paradise regained, and I march with you.
So bitter indignation tore at my heart and cracked it till it broke. I never had a patient mind for tyrants, and I march with you.
I hailed my sunburned children in their youth. Pioneers, pioneers. I said they should be free. I sang democracy, the new word, the new meaning, the new day. And I march with you.
The miserable shall be lifted up, the tyrants all cast down.
The Parliament of Men, the Federation of the World.
Well, maybe they'll take a while to grow, but Puddinhead Wilson says cauliflower is just a cabbage with a college education. So we might start in about this business now. I may have made a living cracking jokes, but one thing I did hate was cruelty. One thing I did dislike was pompous fools treading on decent people. Count me in.
Milton and Whitman, Tennyson and Swift, Mark Twain and Hugo. Everyone who wrote with a free pen in words of living fire, from Plato dreaming of his bright republic to every exile walking in our streets, exiled for truth and faith, and all of ours, all of our own today, all those who speak for freedom. These are our voices. These shall light our fire. Light the bright candle that shall not be quenched, that never has been quenched in all man's years, although his darkness, all tyranny have tried to quench it. Call the roll of those who tried to quench it.
Darius the Persian, Darius the great king.
Where is Darius?
Dead, forgotten and dead. Attila the Hun, Attila devourer of peoples.
Where is Attila?
Bones, forgotten bones.
Alaric the Goth, Alaric, destroyer of Rome.
Where is Alaric?
Dust, forgotten dust.
Adolf Hitler, born April 20th, 1889. Adolf Hitler, burner of books. Adolf Hitler, destroyer of thought. Adolf Hitler, born 1889. We are waiting, Adolf Hitler. The books are waiting, Adolf Hitler. The fire is waiting, Adolf Hitler. The Lord God of hosts is waiting, Adolf Hitler.
You have heard Ralph Bellamy in They Burn the Books, a drama written for radio by Stephen Vincent Benet. Tonight's performance was broadcast by permission of the Writers' War Board. The script of this broadcast is available in pamphlet form through your bookshop or from the publishers Farrar and Reinhardt. We wish to thank the Hollywood Victory Committee for the appearance on this program of Mr. Ralph Bellamy. Music by Wilbur Hatch, program produced by Chet Huntley. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.
These 20 years. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we of WHAS observe an anniversary, a milestone in our history. For it was 20 years ago, in July 1922, back in the days when radio meant headphones and crystals, cat whiskers and tuning coils, that these words first were heard.
This is WHAS, the radio telephone broadcasting station of the Courier Journal and the Louisville Times in Louisville, Kentucky.
Those were the words, and that was the voice that uttered them. That memorable night in 1922, when WHAS gave forth its first infant cry. Tonight, 2 decades later, we are here not to look to the future, as is ever the aim in radio, but rather to look to the past, to review all too briefly the accomplishments of these past 20 years.
But how did this begin? How did this creation of a radio station come about?
For that, let us go back to the month of May in 1922. In his office, Judge Robert Worth Bingham, publisher of the Courier Journal and the Louisville Times, is dictating a letter addressed to his friend and fellow worker in the past, Credo Harris.
I intend to erect a broadcasting plant that will carry religious consolation, entertainment, and a wide knowledge of world affairs to Kentuckians and our Indiana neighbors, especially to those unfortunates who are shut in, the sick, the blind, the paralyzed. It must be a radio station which, above all else, is built on character and conducted with unvarying good taste. I am hoping that you will direct it for me, because we see eye to eye.
Such was the charge delivered to Credo Harris by Judge Bingham. How well that charge has been fulfilled is apparent to all who know the WHAS of today, who have followed its achievements during these 20 years. And time forbids that we tell them all here, nor can we mention all the many whose efforts have gone into building the WHAS of today. For, as we in radio know only too well, time is a precious commodity. And so only the highlight events can claim our attention now as we scan these 20 years.
July 18th, 1922.
WHAS, one of the pioneer radio stations of America, went on the air with a staff of 3 people.
Note that. 3 people. Today, the staff comprises nearly 100.
A schedule of 2.5 hours a day on the air.
2.5 hours. Today, it's 19 hours a day. 24 when public service so demands.
And a power of 500 watts.
Just 1/100th of today's 50,000 watts.
Truly, those were pioneer days. A burlap padded studio, transmitter and studio controls, and an office for the use of the three people who made up the entire staff of WHAS. Credo Harris, manager, Emmett Graft, engineer, and a secretary, Dorothy Kercheval. All three still with us today.
Those were the days when Gallagher and Sheen were the sensation of New York, when the toddle was the latest dance step, and a few brave people were pioneering in the complexities of a Chinese game called Mahjong.
But WHAS was pioneering, too, in things that today are accepted as everyday occurrences. On September 2nd, WHAS pioneered the first remote broadcast, bringing organ music over telephone wires from the Alamo Theater.
And on October 4th came the first WHAS broadcast of a baseball game, based on wire reports of the World Series between the Giants and the Yanks.
If you're interested, the Giants won 3-2 and took the series 4 games to none. One was tied.
1923 rolled by, and then came 1924. And as radio grew, so too did WHAS. Highlights of 1924 included the broadcast of a telephone conversation between Credo Harris in Louisville and Mary Pickford in New York, an unheard-of innovation in those days.
Yet a forecast of the 2, 3, and 5 or 6-way pickups that are so frequently used in our newscasts of today.
On July 19th, 1924, when WHAS was 2 years and 1 day old, engineers succeeded in picking up broadcast signals from the WHAS transmitter far underground in the depths of Mammoth Cave.
A tablet at that subterranean spot marks the site of this, another WHAS first.
And it was on November 24th, just about the time Knute Rockne and the famed Four Horsemen were making football history at Notre Dame, that a letter was received reporting reception of WHAS, still only a 500-watter, in London, England. "1925 was an important year in many ways. That was the year that all-electric sets began to replace the old receivers with their cabinets full of batteries, or crystal sets and headphones. The famous Scopes trial was held in Dayton, Tennessee, and the eyes of the world turned to Sand Cave, Kentucky, where Floyd Collins was trapped in a newly explored cavern. WHAS broadcast hourly bulletins on the progress of rescue work, as reported by Skeets Miller, later to become an executive of NBC. That same year, a two-way conversation with a plane in flight was broadcast for the first time by WHAS. But perhaps the most interesting broadcast of that year took place on May 16th, when Credo Harris and Emmett Graft climbed to the lofty cupola at Churchill Downs to bring to the listening public for the first time a word picture of the thrills and color of Kentucky's greatest racing classic, as Flying Ebony with Earl Sandy up won the 51st running of the Kentucky Derby. 1926, the year Rudolph Valentino died, and Washington, seeing the need for regulation of the many radio stations springing up all over the country, saw fit to establish the Federal Radio Commission. 1926 brought a continued parade of personalities and events carried to the ears of a waiting people through the medium of WHAS. The visit to Kentucky of Queen Marie of Romania, the Dempsey-Tunney fight in Philadelphia, and our first broadcast from Lexington, the performance of an oratorio there.
And 1926 saw the completion of negotiations between Credo Harris and George McClelland of NBC, whereby WHAS became the first of the southern stations to be affiliated with the nation's first radio network.
These negotiations were unique in that they were carried on entirely by telephone. And from that date until the time 5 years later when WHAS joined the Columbia Broadcasting System, NBC and WHAS operated as affiliates, without contract of any kind. Only a gentleman's agreement between George McClelland and Credo Harris. January 4th, 1927, was the date of the first NBC program carried over WHAS. It was one of radio's earliest features, the well-remembered Ever Ready Hour.
Time rolled on. May 20th, 1927, WHAS brought news of Lindbergh's epoch-making flight to Paris. And a month later, the Lone Eagle himself appeared before WHAS microphones.
In passing, we might note that was the year Al Jolson was making movie history with The Jazz Singer. Henry Ford unveiled his long-awaited Model A, and Major Andrew White organized 16 stations into the Columbia Network.
Then came 1928.
For the first time, the WHAS broadcast of the Kentucky Derby with Credo Harris at the microphone was heard over the NBC network, coast to coast. But of far more reaching importance is the event we're coming to now. Listen.
For 6 years, WHAS had operated from the roof of the Courier-Journal building, its transmitter, a baby judged by present standards, putting out its 500-watt signal from an antenna stretched between the two towers still standing on the roof of this building today. Reminders of those days when radio moved with giant strides.
But on November 11th, 1928, 10 years after the armistice of the First World War, WHAS put into service a new transmitter located near Jeffersontown and moved into new and enlarged studios. The power was increased tenfold to 5,000 watts, and facilities for preparation and presentation of programs increased by many-fold.
Yes, those were happy days, those prosperous years, boom years, 1928 and early 1929.
On April 7th, WHAS pioneered again, cooperating in the establishment of radio studios in the University of Kentucky in Lexington.
Since that date, daily programs have come from the university to bring enlightenment from a great educational institution to all within listening radius.
And on June 1st of 1929, Lee Colson, later to become commercial manager, then executive manager, joined the WHAS family to aid assistant manager Martin Campbell in the expanding commercial activities of this radio station, now grown to a point where it could stand on its own feet and begin to pay its own way as it served its far-flung family of listeners.
October 1st.
Brought to Louisville the National Convention of the American Legion.
And a 6.5-hour broadcast in which the facilities of WHAS were open to the musical units, bands, and drum and bugle corps that came to the convention to compete for fame and glory as the largest or the loudest, the snappiest or the oldest in the ranks of the Legionnaires. That is only of passing interest, but one we do remember, for with an outfit from Omaha came a personable young man by name Joe Eaton. The Bugle Corps left, but Joe Eaton stayed to become one of the voices that made of WHAS the friend of countless listeners. The same Joe Eaton that later took over the reins as program director and now heads the commercial department of WHAS.
1929 went its way, as years must come and go. Its passing not regretted by those who felt the October crash.
Then 1930. As we pause only to note that this was the year that Barry Bingham, to whom has passed the work and the ideals to fulfill of his father, Judge Bingham, spent in working and learning, as all of us have done, the duties and problems of any radio station, and more particularly, our own WHAS.
1931. WHAS operated with its first 6 months license granted by the Federal Radio Commission. Amos and Andy were a national habit. Kate Smith was singing The Moon Over the Mountain. Henry Ford produced the 20 millionth struggle buggy, as the gay young men of the time called their autos.
And then came 1932, the year of the Lindbergh kidnapping, and the year we neared the depths of economic depression. Double feature movies began, and a man named Roosevelt ran for president.
A momentous year for us all. On May 15th, WHAS completed over 5 years affiliation with NBC and began an alliance with the up-and-coming Columbia Broadcasting System to bring its listeners the best of radio entertainment.
On October 4th, power was increased to 25 kilowatts.
Only half of today's power, but 50 times the might of the infant of July 18th, 1922.
And November 1st saw the inaugural of daily weekday broadcasts from Asbury College,
of which you'll hear more later. A great year, 1932, but we must hurry on to 1933.
The year Judge Bingham was appointed ambassador to the Court of St. James. Listening centers were established in remote mountain communities in Kentucky.
Roosevelt, the bank holiday, fireside chats, and 3.2 beer were chief topics of conversation.
And then on Sunday morning, December 3rd,
without fanfare or publicity,
WHAS increased its power to 50,000 watts,
that the public interest, convenience, and necessity might be better served.
The years rolled on. 1934, the year that saw the birth of a fourth national network, the Mutual Broadcasting System, operating on a plan in which WHAS had pioneered 2 years before.
Then 1935, the year swing came into its own. Will Rogers met his tragic end, and WHAS originated the first broadcast ever to come to the world from deep down under the earth, 2 miles from daylight in the caverns of Mammoth Cave.
Came 1936, bringing to Louisville and WHAS Mark Etheridge, new then to radio, but later to head the National Association of Broadcasters. And then, 1937.
1937, a year to be remembered by us all. It began as a cold and bleak year, rain and snow and fog. Chill and damp was that fateful January. More snow, then rain, pelting down to melt the blanket of dirty white. Pour it into already swollen creeks and rivers. Still no let-up, as the rain came down and down.
Flood stage at Parkersburg. Flood stage at Cincinnati. River rising at Carrollton. Flood stage expected by tomorrow. Residents of low-lying areas are advised to move to higher ground immediately. Flood stage at Louisville expected Sunday or Monday, unless rains abate.
Flood. Murky fingers of soiled yellow water. Grim, relentless fingers, reaching out to entwine and tangle and grasp and destroy the puny beings who dare oppose its might. Flood. The worst flood in the history of the Ohio Valley. And in the studios of WHAS,
send a boat, 4 persons and sick child at 2210 West Market Street. All persons are asked to stay away from flood areas to avoid interfering with rescue workers. Attention, boat station number 2. Supply of typhoid vaccine is on its way to you. Meet messenger and take same to temporary hospital at Garland School. Family with no food or heat at 2992 Broadway. Send a boat.
Ceaselessly, tired but never giving in, the voices of WHAS went on. In dark and frigid studios lit by candles and lanterns, warmed ever so slightly by oil stoves that filled the air with their throat-catching fumes, the work went on. 37 telephones, manned by staff and volunteers, taking messages, relaying instructions, constantly directing a stream of messages, encouragement, advice, instruction, direction, yes, and prayer to those fighting the worst disaster of our time, the 1937 flood. When power failed, carrying on through the transmitter of good neighbor WSM, cutting corners, using makeshift means, but getting out the messages, handling the news, keeping up morale, bringing aid from the entire nation. That was the job of WHAS. And when we say WHAS, we mean every man and woman who worked with us then. Staff, yes, and volunteers. From newsroom and press room of our parent papers, from Barry Bingham to building quarters. Helpers, too, from the outside. But what did all this mean to the outside world?
A bronze medal awarded by the Columbia Broadcasting System for distinguished contribution to radio. A scroll of honor from Broadcasting Magazine. A tribute from the broadcasting stations of Georgia. A bronze plaque from Variety. Awards to Lee Colson and Joe Eaton from the National Headliners Club. But what did it mean to the men and women who, day and night, for hours on end, labored that the service might not fail, that sickness might be averted, and lives might be saved? Only this did it mean.
A job we had to do.
A job well done.
Our tribute.
The unspoken thanks of those whose help we were. We might go on and on, but in the memory of all of us, the things that remain are very clear. Growth in size, in quality of service, in acceptance by those whom we seek to serve.
Late in 1937, new studios were dedicated, the last word in equipment and design. In 1938, the new transmitter and vertical radiator at Eastwood were put into service, supplicating the old but faithful equipment at Jeffersontown. Orrin Towner came to install the new transmitter, of which he was co-designer, and remained chief engineer of the rapidly growing WHAS.
That same year began the expansion of programming and production under supervision of program director Robert Kennett, which brought WHAS programs to a new high level of entertainment and service value. Newscasts were increased and given established spots. Sports and special events received added emphasis, and musical programs reached a new high in quality.
These advances continued year by year. New faces came into the WHAS family to work side by side with those who had been with us from the beginning. Horizons were widened, activities grew by leaps and bounds. An agricultural department was established. WHAS became even better known to the nation, feeding programs of every type from coast to coast. And then, in 1940...
The rumblings of war.
As always, when its services are needed, the facilities of WHAS were available whenever requested by those agencies active in our national defense. Operation 24 hours a day when news warranted it. Announcements, programs by and on behalf of the armed forces, the Red Cross, the Treasury in its war bond drive, the OPM, the OPA, to mention only a few.
Then came December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, and the United States at war.
Immediately, operations at WHAS were put on a war footing. Precautions to guard against unauthorized use of radio facilities, protection of studios and transmitter, and a constant alert lest anything be said or done that might give aid or comfort to the enemy.
No letdown in program structure, though.
Rather an increase in every effort to awaken national consciousness, to bolster morale, and keep the public informed.
With first call given to messages and broadcasts from our government to the people.
Carrying out the charge of 20 years before, that this radio station should bring to all people those things which are their need and their desire, that their interest, convenience, and necessity might be served by means of this inanimate creation, WHAS, made a vital force in character by those who built it, directed it, and carried on its activities during these 20 years. So much for the bare history of WHAS. Much has been left unsaid, but let it suffice that it is not the events themselves, but the results achieved that really count. What are the things called for by Judge Bingham in founding this station 20 years ago? A plant to bring to the people religious consolation, entertainment, and knowledge. Now, what has been achieved?
In religion, daily broadcasts from Asbury College in Wilmore, Kentucky, establishing a family altar, interdenominational in character, and spreading through word and song the message and comfort of faith and devotion. A church service from our studios every Sunday, and a devotional period daily throughout the week conducted by ministers of every faith, these in cooperation with the Louisville Council of Churches. A weekend service of meditation conducted by Dr. Charles W. Welsh, former moderator of the Presbyterian Church of America. Regular broadcasts have been conducted by members of the Catholic faith and the Jewish. Truly, it may be said that WHAS has ever cooperated to bring to those who cannot find it elsewhere the comfort and help of religious faith.
What about education and information?
WHAS has always recognized its obligation to the educational institutions As facilities expanded, so did the scope and form of its educational service enlarge. First local school broadcasts, later to be supplanted by programs of wider application. Since 1929, daily programs of information, culture, and entertainment, too, have been broadcast from the University of Kentucky. Weekly programs of outstanding quality have come from the University of Louisville under the guidance of Dr. Raymond Kent, and from the University of Indiana, and many programs from other institutions throughout the state.
For the farmer, no series can have meant more than the daily talks presented by the College of Agriculture of the University of Kentucky under Dean Cooper and conducted by L.C. Brewer. And 2 years ago, WHAS set up its own agricultural department to add to its service in rural areas, cooperating with state, county, and other agricultural organizations in Kentucky and Indiana to bring information and guidance to the farms of this area.
In civic matters, WHAS microphones are open to all qualified persons or organizations who have matters of importance to discuss. They are ever at the service of our nation's armed forces. Weekly programs are broadcast from Fort Knox, from Camp Shelby, and from the air base at Bowman Field.
And what of the service to mountain areas? Cooperating with the University of Kentucky, WHAS assisted in the establishment of listening centers in remote cabins and isolated mountain communities, locations reached only by muleback over tortuous mountain trails. People cut off from regular channels of news and communication and the other benefits that, by us, are taken for granted. Radio receivers were installed and maintained in these remote centers, where folk from miles around can come to listen regularly to programs of news, information, and cultural interest, and join in discussion groups conducted by trained leaders at these listening centers. Only the magic of radio and this pioneer activity by WHAS and Kentucky State University could have made such a thing possible.
We could go on further, but time is pressing. Tonight we have looked at the past, reviewing a good job well done, following the precepts laid down by Judge Bingham and so faithfully carried out under the guidance of Credo Harris. Now, what of the future? Need we say more than this? That the record of the past 20 years will be continued as we pledge ourselves to the furtherance of that cardinal code of all broadcasters, that the public interest, convenience, and necessity may best be served. That is ever the aim of we who are WHAS, radio station of the Courier Journal and the Louisville Times.